I'm not Andy. If you want to know what Andy looks like, if you were missing, like you were been short-changing somewhere, Andy's sad not to be here today because I have to go and deal with some family stuff, so he's asked me to step in and do that. I do work with Andy, so I'm not just like some random off the street. I do feel qualified to do this workshop, and I hope that you feel that at the end as well. You can let me know. So I'm Ben, and I work part-time with Andy, and my particular role is normally doing stuff around wellbeing for people who work in schools, so school staff. But I do have a wider brief in the organisation as well, and do quite a lot of the content stuff that we put out on our website as well. The other part of my work, just for context, is that I work with young people in an alternative education provision, working with perhaps some of the most vulnerable young people in Sheffield, providing a different environment for them to learn and grow in. And so that's kind of where I'm coming from. It's probably important to say that what I'm not going to do is give you the definitive, forever, full stop on the issue of wellbeing today. I'm going to present a few ideas and tools which I hope you find useful. I had a kind of tension within me about whether to present Andy's material or my own, and I felt actually to be authentic to what Andy had kind of built on the programme, it's better to present predominantly what's Andy's material. It is material that's relatively familiar to me, but I'm trying to be authentic in the way that kind of presenting the Andy kind of stuff rather than mine. So what we'll do is we'll look at a few different tools that might support you to think about what wellbeing looks like for you. But as I say, not the kind of full stop end of the conversation, lots more to say on the subject. I think that the kind of starting point this morning is to acknowledge the fact that we're all really aware of the headlines out there around children and young people's wellbeing. We know that we're constantly, and I think Beth mentioned this morning, kind of the idea that we are really aware of the fact that there's increasing need around young people's well-being. And if anybody who is working with children and young people will be, I'm sure, really aware of that, particularly in light of the last kind of couple of years. But this workshop is not about young people's well-being, although actually I might argue it is. Because for me, I think if your well-being as somebody who works with children and people isn't okay, then that impacts on the children and people you're working with. So well done for making the choice to come to something about you today, because not everyone has made that choice, and genuinely I think that is a bit of a proactive choice you're taking to say that actually that it is not okay for you to be constantly trying to pour from an empty cup. And I think that the principle for me is that the work I do in education is all about saying that I'm actually, controversially maybe, I'm not passionate about school staff's well-being. I'm actually passionate about your children and people. But I think that because I'm passionate about children and people, I really am passionate about school staff well-being. Because I think that if we get it right for the adults who work with children and people, then they will get it right for the children and people we work with, okay? And so I think that's really important to note. When we're talking about well-being, bit of a game changer for me. Well-being is often thought about as being along a continuum between good and bad mental health. Okay, so mental health is thought of as on a continuum, and we often think about the fact that we can move up and down that continuum in terms of our mental health. On a daily basis and a monthly basis and a yearly basis as well. And that's a really helpful idea to think about, the idea that actually that we all have mental health, and our mental health is sometimes good and it's sometimes not so good. The limitations though of that mean that actually we just kind of accept the fact that sometimes our mental health is good and sometimes our mental health isn't so good. The other axis, which for me is a bit of a game changer, is the well-being axis. And actually Tim Jansen, who's doing another one of the workshops today, he initially was the person who showed me this. And I think this has really informed my practice and my thinking around kind of what we do around mental health and well-being. So we've got this other axis, which is about well-being, which basically means that what we're saying is that regardless of where you are on that continuum with your mental health, there is still stuff that you can do on this axis around your well-being. So, if you are somebody who has been diagnosed with a mental health disorder, like psychosis or depression or anxiety, then that is something that you may need some support and help with that's kind of clinical, okay? May not always, depending on where you are on that continuum, okay? It may need to be some kind of clinical support. But there are still things that you can do that will give you the best chance of being able to manage that challenge, mental health challenge, by supporting your own well-being. And a lot of what we do at Space to Breathe is work on this axis rather than that axis, because what we're not is we're not clinicians, we're not kind of psychologists, we're not trained to do that kind of work. And we respect and honour the fact that that is a legitimate thing. And I would want to say that I would really encourage anybody who's struggling with mental health to go and get some kind of help and support around that. But at the same time, there will be things, I think, that can help you with your well-being, which will give you the best chance of being able to face the stuff on that axis as well, okay? And so that kind of continuum, I think, helps to explain that. I realise there's a lot of words on that, and I'm also talking. I'm going to just give you a moment to read that and kind of just process that for a moment, if that's okay. The other thing to say about well-being is, for me, well-being is not about surviving, it's about thriving, okay? So it's very best, it's not about just getting through life, it's about being able to do life well. And actually, if you look at definitions around well-being, they refer to this idea of human flourishing, this idea of being able to do well in life and overcome and cope with the challenges that we might face. So I probably also should say at the beginning that what I'm not good at doing, because I don't like it, is talking at people for a long time. That may be reassuring to you, I don't know. But so what I will do throughout this session is I will get you to do a few bits of activities as well, if that's okay. And I want to use this time to help you to process and learn and engage with the material as much as just listen to my voice, okay? So I want to do a little activity with you first of all, if that's okay. One of the ways we can think about our well-being is to have this idea of a tree, okay? And we use a lot of creative tools at Space to Breathe because it taps into something that's a bit different in terms of how we think and how we feel, and I might perhaps reference that a bit more in a little while. The idea of a tree is that a tree flourishes and does well when kind of the roots are really good. Okay? And so what I want you to spend a few moments doing now, if you can, is onto your chair, there's a piece of paper. I'm really aware that there's something to lean on, so I hope you can find something to lean on, or you can find a way of doing this without leaning on something. I want you to invite you to reflect for a few moments about your own well-being, okay? And think a bit about what are the things that actually give you strength, okay? And for me, those things are the things that are enduring, the things that are always true, always present. They may be people, they may be places, and they may be principles, okay? And those are the things I think that root us, okay? And at the same time, be thinking about, you can do this in either or, I really don't mind, what are the signs that you are thriving? When you're doing at your best, when you are feeling at your best, what does that look like? What's going on for you? If I was to take a video of that, what would be seen in that video, okay? What is the best version of yourself? And what would be noticed by you internally? What would that feel like inside? But also, what would other people be witnessing on externally about kind of what's going on for you? How would other people know that you're doing well at the moment? And so think about those leaves and the fruit that come out when things are kind of going well for you. I've put a 3-minute timer and a 4-minute timer on there, and also put a 5-minute timer on there as well. And I'm not quite sure how much time to give you, because again, there's some options there. I think what I'm going to do is give you 4 minutes. We'll go straight down the middle if that's all right. Just to give you a bit of time to think about that, if that's okay. I'm not looking for you to do anything that's artistic here, so don't worry about the art skills. It's more about the process than it is about anything else. If you prefer just to write words rather than do a picture at all, that's also totally fine. But just have a reflect for 4 minutes, a little bit about kind of what are the signs that you're thriving, what does it look like, and also what are the things that ground you and root you, the things that kind of give you strength. Is that okay? I do have spare pens, sorry, yes. Does anybody need a spare pen? I've got pens. If anyone needs one, come and grab one. Just jot on works as well, what guarantee does.
Yep.
You may want to spend a bit more time doing that at a later date. You're welcome to carry on and having a think about it as I carry on as well if you want to. But that exercise is partly about trying to just start to get you to think a bit about being more self-aware. Maybe that's stuff you already know anyway, and that's great if you do. But one of the things I wanted to present to you today is this idea that actually our mental health and well-being is supported often by our self-awareness. And things that draw our self-awareness, and we're going to have a lot of drawing forever, aren't we? Things that kind of prompt and promote our self-awareness are good for us. But actually that self-awareness has to be then used in a particular way, because I can become aware of something, and then I can start to apply some kind of judgment to that. And I think that actually, one of the things that is enduring for me, as I'm sure for many of us in this room today, is my faith. But I might also say that my experience of my faith community can sometimes mean that I am inclined towards judgment, because I'm inclined towards putting a judgment on whether my feelings are okay or not. Okay? And I'm not saying that that's my experience, I'm not saying that everyone's experience, but I do wonder whether sometimes our faith cultures can actually encourage us to start to make judgments about what's right or wrong, and what's okay and what's not okay. But for me, part of supporting our well-being is about understanding that actually when we accept what is, then actually, and accept ourselves for where we're at, and allow ourselves to be what we are, then actually I think that then we can change. And that's backed up by, I suppose, this idea of, from Carl Jung, who was a very important psychologist, I suppose, really, who said this: the curious paradox is that when I accept myself as I am, then I can change. One thing I will say in my next seminar, which I don't know whether anyone's coming to that one or not, is that I think that actually we are, as human beings, we are inclined towards growth. And that is a natural propensity, that's a natural inclination that we have as human beings. And I think we will grow, but actually I think we grow best when we're from a place of security and acceptance. So I think that when we do that for the people, that's great, but I think we also need to do that for ourselves. And often when I'm feeling not okay, then I start then to apply some kind of judgment to that not okayness about, I should feel okay, or I shouldn't feel like that, or whatever else. And that can then compound my feelings of not feeling okay. And so I think what we really need to be able to do is just to be okay with where we're at and accept where we're at, and be able to kind of be with our feelings in that kind of way. And only when we can do that for ourselves will we be able to do that for the people, which is an important thing that you will understand is really important for the growth of the people around you as well. And we're not good, I don't think, often at applying the same wisdom to ourselves that we would to other people. Okay? There's a great thing I came across recently, a book I read about the Solomon's paradox, and you'll understand where this comes from if you know your Bible a little bit. This idea that we're all able to be the expert in somebody else's life, but we lack the objectivity of the expert in our own lives. Okay? And that's what's called the Solomon's paradox. Okay? And sometimes we don't apply that same wisdom to ourselves that we might apply to other people. We don't apply the same grace to ourselves that we might suggest that we should be applying to other people. And so one of the really important tools that we can use in our well-being is being self-aware, but then also then accepting that where we are is okay. So I want to lead you through another little exercise, if that's okay. And I wonder if you'll be comfortable enough to just kind of maybe pop things down on the floor out of your way, and maybe just kind of engage in a momentary breathing exercise with me, if that's okay. So if you feel comfortable to do so, maybe close your eyes. If not, maybe just soften the gaze of your eyes, just so that you are kind of less focused on the visual stimulus around you. And we're going to do something where I'm going to ask you to just be a bit creative in your thinking, to think about checking in with yourself now. And one of the reasons I'm doing that is because, as I mentioned earlier, there's something about creative tools which help us to access a different part of our psyche, if you like, our inner self, our soul maybe I might say. And there's this whole idea that when we engage in creative things, then we're probably much more in touch with the reality of how we're feeling. So if I just invite you for a moment then just to breathe, maybe to start off by taking a big sigh out, and then just start to breathe normally, because sometimes we make a breathing exercise into something far more complicated than that. So maybe you just want to start by doing a big sigh out. And then just notice your breathing returning to normal after you do that. You might find it helpful just to place your hand on your abdomen, just to kind of just so you can notice your breathing a little bit. I wonder if I can just invite you to just notice 3 sounds around you. Maybe try and tune into a couple of different smells that are around you. And just as you reflect on your mood this morning, I wonder if you can reflect on whether, if your mood was a weather this morning, I wonder what weather that you would be, or your mood would be. If your mood was a colour this morning, what colour would it be? If your mood was an animal, what kind of animal would it be? And if your mood was a food, what kind of food would it be? And just as you've noticed kind of your responses to that, I just want to encourage you just to accept that where you're at and what you feel this morning is okay. Maybe just internally say to yourself that it's okay to feel what you're feeling, whether it be good or not so good. And now just as you take each breath in, just maybe ask yourself a question: what is it that you are needing this morning? And you might want to turn that into a prayer. You may just simply want to breathe in the thing that you feel you need, whether it be hope, encouragement, or any other thing. And just as you're ready, maybe just start to open your eyes and maybe just try and notice, and this is going to be quite difficult to do this, but just try and notice 3 or 4 different colours in this room around you as you come back into the room. I'm just going to chat to the person next to you about kind of whatever you're thinking after just doing that exercise. I don't think we want you to necessarily share the specifics of what you kind of what you were thinking about for you particularly, but any kind of reflections or thoughts on kind of that as an exercise or anything I've said so far.
I think that's a good point, isn't it?
Shall we? Sorry, back as a whole group. Sorry. Anyone want to share any reflections, thoughts, comments on what we've done or thought about so far?
I thought the food one was really interesting.
Okay.
I couldn't actually think of a food, but I just thought that was like really interesting because the weather and the colours and that I can understand. But food is just something I've not really thought about.
Okay. Attributing a metaphor to the
Yeah.
to that food. Okay, interesting. Yeah.
We both said that we couldn't think of 3 or hear. We couldn't hear 3 sounds.
Yes, that's hard.
And the pressure we then put in our ourselves that we fail at.
Oh yes.
And even in our own heads, but that
Yeah.
is our feeling to ourselves. So sort of gentleness even in these
Yeah.
situations.
Yeah. And actually the smell one is hard. I didn't make that. I knew that when I said it. I think sometimes that for me, I can do it, but I have to really concentrate. It's amazing if you do concentrate, you often can smell more than one thing. It's just that I think it's that whole idea about being nose blind, isn't it?
Yeah.
It don't become quite nose blind, but tuning into that is just a way of engaging our senses a bit more. So I understand it might be hard if you were then feeling a bit of like pressure. So sorry.
I think if you were doing this, not in a workshop like this,
Yeah.
but or longer to do it, then yeah, you know. But I think the pressure was, we said that next thing.
I'm sorry that I was getting myself saying. Okay. Good. Great. Okay, we'll move on if that's okay then, just to have a little think about our next little thought or kind of idea. So I'm moving on to think now a bit about thoughts and thought patterns and how we manage our thought patterns a little bit. And often one of the things that can come out of that exercise or doing something like that is we can become really aware of different kind of thoughts. And I want to use this idea of thoughts being a bit like grooves on a record, okay, that kind of go round and round and round. And I know that's my experience sometimes, that I can ruminate, I can get really caught up in a particular thought. And so I think there are a couple of things we can do with that when we're kind of trapped in a little bit of a loop of thoughts. We have the option to either lift the needle, or we have the option to change the record. And I'm going to talk about change the record first. Well, I think we've just done the lift the needle thing actually, sorry. The lift the needle is about the idea of giving ourselves just a moment of space. And sometimes by just taking a moment of space, just to stop and notice what's going on, then actually, again, that can sometimes mean that we then have had enough distance to then reapproach whatever we're doing in our day, to be able to kind of, with a bit of a renewed kind of sense of kind of positivity or hope or kind of energy or whatever else. It's a little bit like that idea that sometimes if you're going for a long run, you might just need a mini break just to be able to kind of get yourself ready for the next sort of step or whatever that you're doing. And so the idea of lifting the needle, taking time, taking a moment, and would that moment be literally a moment, or would that moment be a day? So this week I wasn't feeling very well, and I am internally programmed to not take time off work, okay, because that's my kind of Protestant work ethic that I've inherited somehow, okay. But I actually took the day off on Thursday because I really didn't feel very well, and I just thought, do you know what, I need to invest a little bit of time, and that was really hard for me to do that. I don't find that easy, okay, but I lifted the needle and said, you know what, I need to invest in having a bit of time off to make sure that I'm okay again, to be able to do Friday and then today as well. And I did feel so much better for doing that, okay. And so that was an example of me lifting the needle and taking space and time in a bit of a longer way. And I felt able to reapproach then the kind of challenges and tasks ahead of me with a bit more renewed energy. But that could also look like, as I said before, just like taking a moment. So when we're in the middle of a stressful situation, it's just taking ourselves physically away, or even just taking ourselves mentally away for a moment, just to be able to have that moment of self-awareness and ask ourselves that question: what do we need right now? What do I need? What do I need? And also, how am I feeling? And accepting the fact that you're feeling the way. It's okay that I feel a bit stressed in this situation. It's okay that I feel a bit overwhelmed by this. It's okay that this is what's going on for me. But the change in the record thing is a bit different. Okay, the change in the record thing is supported by this idea here that this is an NHS concept, and it's backed up by a bit of like CBT type approach, the kind of cognitive behavioural therapy type approach, which is this idea that we catch thoughts, and I think it's what you do through doing something like the previous exercise, of kind of catching the thought that's going on, being aware of the thought, checking it, and asking some questions about that thought, and then trying to change it in some way, okay, so changing that record, okay. And the questions you might ask yourself as you catch that thought is the thought true? Is the thought helpful? And can I do anything about it? Okay, pragmatic questions. And often, when we're in stress state, what's happening in our brains is that some of you may have kind of come up with this idea that our brains are made up of 3 different parts. That we've got our kind of brainstem just here, we've got this bit here, which is our neocortex, and this part of our brain here, which is the front bits here, are the bits that are able to think more clearly and logically about our lives and things, okay? And those parts of the brain, interestingly, are the last parts of our brains that get developed both as children, but then also have become rewired as in our teenage years as well. But one of the things that happens is, when we get ourselves into a situation where we feel in some way under threat, is what happens is this part of our brain can go offline, and we actually start to operate from this part of our kind of physiology, if you like. And that part of our brain is very good at running, it's very good at freezing, and it's very good at fighting, okay? But it's not very good at being logical. Okay? And part of that stopping and taking a moment and taking a breath is giving our brain a little bit of a chance to come back online, catching the thought, checking it, and asking some logical questions about whether that thought is helpful, true, and is there actually anything I can do about it. And a little tool that I find really useful as a way of doing that is this tool that some of you may have come across before. A guy called Stephen Covey wrote a book called 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It's a great read if ever you've got the time to read it. But one of the concepts he has in his book is this idea that we need to be able to distinguish between the things that we can do things about and the things we can't do something about. Often what happens in life is we become consumed with worries and anxieties about things that we have absolutely no control over. Okay? And actually what we do is we're putting our energy into trying to change things that we're never going to be able to change. Okay? And what that does is that brings about frustration for us and compounds our then powerlessness or sense of efficacy and sense of ability to be able to kind of get on in life at all. Okay? And so what he talks about is being able to distinguish between those things that are within our circle of influence and those things that are outside our circle of influence. Okay? So for instance, at the moment, just a few current issues that might be on your mind, I don't know about you, but that's things that when I was putting this together the day were on my mind, is Russia's advance in Ukraine. Really difficult situation, okay? I want to really acknowledge, and I'm not trying to diminish anything about the importance of that, we should have some concern about that, okay? We should have some compassion for it, we should have some kind of sense of injustice about it, all that kind of stuff, okay? But actually, when it comes to reality, there's lots that I cannot change about the situation, okay? And so that might have to be one of those things that I'm concerned about, but I have to recognise the limitations of my influence to change that situation, okay? The rising cost of living is definitely something that's on the news constantly, we're bombarded with that constantly, and it will have an impact on my personal life, okay? But there's some things it will impact on, and some things I can do something about, and some things I can't do anything about. I can't change the system that's making that happen, okay? There's many young people currently suffering with mental health problems. We started our workshop by talking about that, didn't we, as well, okay? I can't stop that whole crisis, but there are little things that I can do. Will my holiday be cancelled? Who knows? Because actually we're in an evolving situation, aren't we? And there are things that kind of that could possibly happen. Okay, so to lots of people in the last couple of years. The things on the inner green circle are perhaps some of the things that I could do that are within my influence, but actually are letting go of the things that are not within my influence. So under your chair, you've got a version of this under your chair. And what I'm going to do is just encourage you, and you're very welcome to not do this if you don't want to, but I'm going to invite you to have a go at kind of think about this for yourself. The left-hand side of your piece of paper is a space for you to maybe initially write down some of the things that may be kind of worries, concerns, things that are on your mind at the moment, and then maybe you can then start to sort them into those things on the green and blue circle. Before you get started though, just a little thing to say, is that there's, with a lot of these things, it's often about breaking that thing down. So a bit like with the Russia thing and the Ukraine thing, there's lots that I can't really think about that situation, but I can do something, if that makes sense. It's about working out what can I do about that, rather than taking on the whole problem. It's about breaking it down to what's manageable and realistic for you to possibly do. And one of the things we can always do, I think, is we always have within our locus of control the ability to change our reaction to something. We've always got the ability to change how we react to it. We may not have a choice about what other people do about that, if that makes sense. Okay? So again, I'm going to give you 4 minutes, if that's okay, just to kind of keep us running. And some of you won't have enough time to complete that, but hopefully 4 minutes gives you a bit of a chance to have a little bit of a go at that, if that's okay. Okay, so some of you may want to carry on doing a bit more of that in the time. Can I just invite you just pop your pen down for a second though, and just to step back from the activity for a minute. And I wonder if I could just get you to think for a minute about what was good about that activity, just in your own mind for a moment. What was good about that activity? And I wonder what was challenging about that activity for you. And just share that with someone next to you about what was good and what was challenging.
Yes.
Okay. Any feedback about kind of how you found that in terms of what was good and what was challenging about that?
I found it really good to actually write down the things that are in my head.
Okay.
Get them out of my head onto a piece of paper so I can see them.
Yeah. And there is some really good research that suggests that is good, because I think sometimes they exist in the head as a tangled mess, and actually by seeing them on a piece of paper it rationalises them, and it kind of feels a bit more like you can hold them better, can't you? So yeah, that's good. Yeah. And actually, interestingly, there's also something, and no critique of anybody who doesn't want to write and would rather do it on their phone, but there is something about that people talk about the idea of actually physically writing can be good for some people, because physiologically that means that your body's almost like working it out, as it were, like kind of almost getting it out of itself and stuff. And so there's something about the kinesthetic element of that that actually is proving to be, for some people, particularly beneficial as well. So So yeah.
I've heard there's another step to it where you then get rid of that piece of paper, it's like your...
Oh,
No.
hold that thought. Yeah, because there's a thing about what you then do, isn't there? So that's really helpful, yeah. Any other thoughts about what was good or what was challenging about that though?
As a perennial list maker, I do that getting it on paper often, but I think I don't do is break it down into things that I can be responsible for compared to a big thing.
So was that helpful for you to start to think about it?
So a big project at work might appear on mine to do this, but actually my role in that might only be to do this one little thing.
Yeah.
So it's like breaking it down to actually make a difference.
That's good. Helpful. Any other thoughts?
I think it can be, we were saying, it can be a bit overwhelming to write down the things in the centre of concern, but actually in a way it's quite therapeutic to go, okay, there's nothing I can't single-handedly stop Putin, but there are things I can do, and that's breaking it down and just kind of thinking, this is concerning me, but I'm doing what I can.
Yeah.
I found that really helpful.
It's good. For me, the bit that I find challenging is the what to do with the things that end up in the blue circle. Because I'm like, okay, well, I've still got the number of headphones, so what do I do about it? And I think there's a couple of things. So I think that first of all, I would want to just remind you of something. I'm sure you've seen this prayer before. This prayer was developed and adopted by Alcoholics Anonymous, but has been by various organisations, I suppose, really as part of their programme, I suppose, about getting people to kind of manage their lives well and better. And this idea of a prayer that says, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And I think that's a prayer, that's a worthy prayer to pray, and a worthy prayer to have up our sleeves to pray, and think and be able to use as part of the process. But I think you're totally right that actually that for some of us, then actually the kinesthetic kind of activity of screwing up the piece of paper, shredding the piece of paper, burning the piece of paper, doing anything to get rid of that piece of paper, actually again, what it does is doing those physiological activities, those physical activities, sorry, they are things that help our brain to kind of connect with the fact that something's gone. And I think that actually, we as Christians have done this sort of stuff for years, like historically, like hundreds of years. There's been something in our liturgy, there's been something in the way that we've done church that gives us some metaphors. And those metaphors have been developed probably without the kind of understanding of what that does to our brain, because we've only kind of started to understand our brains much more recently. And it's interesting to me to reflect on the fact that the people obviously developed those kind of practices over spiritual practices over many years, knowing they were helpful without actually knowing why they were helpful. But now we've got evidence that would say that those kind of things where you do get rid of stuff actually kind of is really helpful practice in terms of us being able to notice, and our bodies and our brains being able to notice that we have got rid of something or said goodbye to something as well. So the other thing about changing the record might be this next little idea here as well. This idea of benefit finding or gratitude journaling or any of those kind of things as well. And so the thing about this is that I would want to put as a caveat here is this is really powerful. However, I don't want to suggest that the way to deal with negative thoughts and feelings is just to pretend that everything's okay and to be all happy jolly. That's not how we do it, because that's what I would call toxic positivity. And we do have in our culture an element of that, and some kind of workplaces, some kind of organisations have that toxic positivity where they require you, they demand of you that you remain positive at all times. And that isn't helpful or realistic, because then that compounds that guilt, that judgment thing we talked about at the beginning about what is okay and not okay to feel, okay? But there is something about kind of actually choosing intentionally to notice positives that can be really good for us. So, there was a study done where they asked people to, for 21 days, interesting timeline that for me, 21 days, at the end of each day, to stop and record 3 positive things that happened that day to them, 3 positive happenings, if you like, and then to journal about one of those things. And what they found is, for people who did that consistently for 21 days, is they literally rewired their brain to notice the positives more easily and readily in their everyday life. I will testify to the fact that I have done this, I do this, and at times I do it more intentional than others when I'm struggling a bit more, because I know that it works for me, because it helps me to start to not be so consumed by all the negative stuff that my brain is telling me is happening. It helps me to recognise that I'm also within that positive as well, and it helps me to think more positively about that stuff. So there's a bit of a technique to it. So I think that the technique is this, that you, as I say, you stop at the end of each day or at some point in your day and you write down, as I say, 3 things, 3 happenings. No, so we're not talking about being grateful for things like your food on the table and your house and that kind of stuff as well, which is also really good to do, by the way. But this is a bit more specific about happenings. But then you journal and about that positive thing. And what you're doing by journaling is, or what you're meant to do as you're journaling, is you're meant to be writing about feelings, senses and detail. And as you do that, what you're doing is you're causing your brain to relive that experience again. So you're getting 2 for 1, basically. Buy one, get one free, okay? So you're choosing one of those experiences to write about, focusing on feelings, senses and detail, and you're helping your brain to re-experience that thing again. And there's a little bit of an example on the screen there of one that I did quite some time ago now. Okay? So maybe it's quite early in the day to be doing this, but I wonder if already in this day that you could spend, and I'm just going to give you literally 3 minutes, there's no time on the screen, so you can just trust me with the timing, 3 minutes to just jot down 3 things that you are grateful for already today, and then maybe start to write the story about one of those things, focusing on feelings, senses and detail. Is that alright? 3 minutes. See what you can do. Maybe if you're able just to stop what you're doing and kind of finish that off a bit later, that'd be great. We'll whistle through if that's okay, just to give us a bit of time at the end to do more as well, that's alright. What's really interesting about that is, as I look around the room you're doing it, so you literally had a smile on your face as you're doing it, because you were reliving those experiences, which was great. It's exactly what that's meant to do. If you're interested in hearing a bit more about that, the Happiness Advantage, I think it's called, on a TED Talk that's on YouTube. I've forgotten the name of the guy who did it, it's off the top of my head, but he's a positive psychologist, and so I wouldn't agree with everything he said, but everything he says, but I do quite like that TED Talk, and that's where he talks a bit about that kind of practice particularly, and it's a great TED Talk to watch if you're interested in watching a bit more about it. Only about 10 minutes long, so worthwhile the investment, I think. I just want to make another little note about resilience as we get towards the end. So resilience is something else that we can think about in terms of looking after our well-being, and what is resilience and how do we remain resilient. Resilience is not about having thick skin and getting on with it and dealing with stuff and just having a stiff upper lip and putting on a brave face. It's about the ability to adapt and bounce, I suppose, really. It's about recognising the fact that life is never easy for anybody. And very few people are privileged enough to go through life without having any challenges at all. Some people have a lot greater challenges than others, and that's worth acknowledging that, and I think we need to be aware of that some people are more challenged in life than others. But in terms of our own resilience, there are a couple of images which we might use to help us to think about how we can be resilient. The first is a frying pan. Okay, and the second is, again, going back to the roots thing with the tree, okay? So I'll talk about the roots first, because that's we already thought about it a little bit. So earlier on, the things that you put on your tree, just coming back full circle here, are the things that maybe I would suggest are part of your resilience. They're the things that ground you, the things that make you you, the things that you can rely on, and I talked about those things being the things that are always true, always enduring. And returning to those things, investing in those things, spending time with those things is one of the ways in which we can be resilient. So when we're feeling challenged, kind of focusing on those things can be a really, really helpful thing for us as well. But the other image, this is Andy's image, is of a frying pan. And what Andy talks about is this idea that actually an important part of resilience is also having good boundaries. Okay? So if you were coming at me with something, I can put a frying pan over myself. Okay? I might use a shield, I don't know why I can put a frying pan. I mean, actually, anyway, he used a frying pan, so I'm going with it. Okay? This idea that we can put a frying pan in front of us to actually protect ourselves, because there's some things we don't have to take on in life. Okay? And actually, I think that some of us are inclined towards taking on other people's stuff more than we need to. Okay? And I think this is really important about understanding what we do and don't have to take on. And that's about actually having some kind of sense of protection, self-preservation. And it's okay sometimes to put the frying pan up and say, do you know what, I don't need to be involved in this. Team not involved. Okay? Team not going to engage in that. I don't need to that's not for me to get involved with. Okay? And that can help us to kind of have healthy sort of protection around ourselves that can create that sense of resilience. The challenge is, if we live all of our life like that, that's not actually very healthy, okay? Because actually, part of life and part of flourishing in life for me is having positive connections with people, and actually that involves vulnerability. And all the stuff around that Brené Brown's done around vulnerability, you're familiar with her work, is about this idea that actually the true and good relationship happens when we're able to have a sense of vulnerability, and that we share that vulnerability, and we own our vulnerability with one another. But that doesn't mean that we have to do it with everybody all of the time. It's about recognising when and where we do that, okay, and having that sort of sense of when we use a frying pan, and actually when we kind of let the guard down a little bit, and who we do that with as well. And it's about, I think, part of it for me is about working out our safer people as well, and what the safer spaces are for us as well in life, and investing in those, and kind of giving time to those things as well. Just a quick note as we end to say that sometimes when you stop and think about your well-being, as you have all done today, and I feel like there's been really positive engagement and really in terms of engagement in terms of we've done, is that it does make you more aware of your own well-being needs, okay? And actually, if one of the things that you are taking from this morning is that you're struggling a bit at the moment, that is okay, okay? Acceptance, okay? Accept that is where you are at, okay? And it's important that we know where we might get extra help and support from. And actually that kind of beautiful image from Charlie Mackesy there about the bravest thing being asking for help. And just a little kind of traffic light system there of kind of where you might go and get that help, which you might just find helpful to reference now. So if you're really, really struggling, then those are some of the places you might go in the red. If you're feeling just a bit more aware that you might need something beyond today to think about your well-being, then I would suggest the things that are going on in that yellow section. And actually it may just be that, you know what, you're noticing generically that actually you would really want to kind of improve your well-being and kind of think a bit more proactively about that. And those things are maybe the things in the green stuff as well. And all those things are great at the right time, and all of us may need to access different ones of those at different times as well, and that is also okay. I think we've done a great job of landing at quite a good time there, okay? So I'm conscious that I do want you to be able to go and maybe have a coffee, maybe in between if you've got time to do that in this workshop. Just very quickly, just to remind you again about this youth work wellbeing survey. If it's relevant to you to fill it in, or you know something it is, please do pass that around. Please do promote that for me. As I say, the more data I've got, the more we're able to then do something more going forward as well. Thanks very much, and hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.